And we are back. It's the Infowarrior with Jason Bermas. We are joined by Joe Banister. FreedomAboveFortune.com is the website.
That's correct, sir.
All right, so you're an IRS agent. You start coming across information that makes you question whether or not the income tax is legal for the majority of Americans. The majority of people who you're actually starting investigations on, prosecuting, going in and getting these people, bringing them before a court of law. And before we get into that, you were talking to me earlier, really the majority of the people that the IRS goes after are poor people. I mean, they really don't go after the big dogs that often, do they?
No, I mean, statistically, obviously, most people are average people.
Yeah.
And so those are the people that the IRS reaches out and touches most of the time. And they're the people that are least able to defend themselves or really even understand how to fight back. So they're easy pickings for the IRS to go out and intimidate and rake over the coals. And
you were using the example that in a lot of cases, someone gets a bill from the IRS for $200 or $500, and they realize it's going to cost them $1,000 or $2,000 just to defend or fight it, whether they're in the right or not. So they're just more than willing to just give that money over, correct?
There's even been testimony that the IRS purposely would send out those kinds of notices, knowing that a certain percentage would just not fight. So it was easy money for the IRS to just go out and take, because people would just give it to them willingly.
All right, now you're a very meticulous guy, like we were discussing earlier. And you come across this information. Now, you're not just listening to radio shows. You're actually checking the info yourself and backing it up. And it gets to the point where you literally have boxes of this information. Now, I don't want to fast forward too far, but just boxes of this information. I guess this is really, if it's in the early to mid-'90s, really when the Internet just started, most web pages were text. So you were able to get maybe court cases and that type of things off there?
Fortunately, I had access to the Internet. The income tax, as we know it today, has been around, well, at least since World War II, but the income tax system has been around since 1913, when the 16th Amendment was, they claim that it was ratified, although there's plenty of evidence that it was not. But basically, 80, 90 years they've had to create this web of deceit and pull the wool over the eyes of the American people. So when you go to try to take it apart and study it, it's a huge undertaking. And, I'd certainly encourage people to educate themselves, but, it's almost like a part-time job for a while. And you're right, by the time I was done, I'm actually still not done, but at the time when the government really came out and attacked me, I shipped about 18 boxes of research to my attorney. So I had accumulated that much, and it was court cases, IRS documents, the historical documents that went back to the 20s, to the teens, early 1900s. The rabbit hole goes pretty deep.
Yeah, I can imagine. And again, someone as meticulous as yourself, and such a good, you were an investigator. So again, you're supposed to be like trying to weed out all the spots. And 18 boxes full. I guess it's kind of easy for me to imagine, since there's papers all over the office in stacks, and we do go through those in a month, 2 months period of time. But for you to get specific documents on one subject is just incredible to me. So you come across this information. You're still with the IRS. What happens next?
Well, I have to say, when I took on this investigation, and it really was an investigation, but it was a personal one. I didn't ask the IRS for permission to undertake it. I just, on evenings and weekends, set out to disprove these claims that I heard in the talk radio show, that most Americans weren't required to pay the federal income tax. Obviously, that's quite a claim to make. And since my entire professional life was wrapped up around the income tax, having become a CPA and then getting sworn in as an IRS special agent, pretty much my whole life was about the income tax. So here's this woman and talk show host claiming that what I have my life wrapped around is deceitful and possibly illegally administered. I needed to get to the bottom of that, primarily because I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. I took the oath to God, and you just don't take an oath like that lightly. So I just began to look into it and expected that I would find that the claims were baloney. But week to month to year, I just kept searching for the holes in what she claimed to be true, and I kept finding more and more evidence that what she said was correct. With documentation coming from the U.S. Supreme Court, from our Congress, from their own archives, This wasn't, the IRS had led me to believe as an investigator that a so-called tax protester or a Infowarrior, they just put together a bunch of BS and try to hawk it to people and make money off of it. And when I investigated, I found that there was actually very thorough researchers, like yourself, like Alex, people that really care about an issue, and you hunt for the facts. You hunt for the evidence that's true. And that's what I found when I investigated the federal income tax, that these were truthful people. They did their homework. They were very thorough. And at the end of this 2-year period, I would go to work every day as an IRS special agent doing my investigations. But at night and on weekends, rather than watching football or playing golf, I was cracking books and making visits to the law library and trying to determine if the job that I had been given was actually helping the IRS to steal from people.
And does that starts to eat away at you, doesn't it? I guess. I mean, you're talking about taking this oath to the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, you're starting to figure out that you're going after the little guy who's really done nothing wrong on behalf of a criminal cartel. And that's when you decide to ask them the questions that you have after you've amassed all this information. And where does it go from there?
Well, as I said, I certainly expected, I just did not expect that I'd find all of this very credible information and evidence. But after 2 years of trying, I just couldn't poke holes in it, in the basic concept that the IRS was over applying the tax law to people that it didn't apply to, and taxing people who weren't supposed to be taxed. And so what I did is I accumulated the highlights of the evidence I had accumulated. I didn't give them all 18 boxes, but just the highlights of it. And I approached my supervisors at the IRS with the intention to have them review it, because I applied all of my professional abilities, my horsepower, to it, and came to the result that I came to, that I think there's a problem here. So I figured, take it to my peers, agents who had 5, 10, 15, 20 years more experience than me, but they took the same oath that I took. They had even more investigative experience. Let's see what their reaction is. And unfortunately, I presented the information to them, and I reiterated that I had taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution, that this issue was really important to me, but it should be important to all of us, because it looked to me like people's rights were being violated and people's property was being taken, outside of the law. Figured everybody should be concerned about that. But I did say, if you can't answer my questions, I may be forced to resign, because I cannot serve two masters. I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And if you're not going to help me resolve this, then I can't continue in this job. Well, having made that based on my inquiries on that premise, of course, that was their door to walk through. And what they did was they told me that they would not review my report, they would not address my concerns, and they would actually provide me with the paperwork to tender my resignation. So that was their basic response. They sent me home for 7 days of administrative leave. They didn't fire me. They just took my badge and...
just for asking the question and giving them the paperwork.
Yes.
7 days off.
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
Right.
I mean, we're not even going to look at it.
No. And they put that in writing.
And that's just got to be just an incredible reality check. I mean, I'm sure that you thought they might not have accepted it, but they'd at least take a look at it. I'm sure you didn't think you were going home that day.
Well, right. And I without tooting my own horn, I was well respected at the San Jose office of the IRS, because if someone needed to, if they had executed a search warrant and they had come back with 20 boxes from this suspect, they trusted that I would have the wherewithal to evaluate it. Mm-hmm. If we were going on a high-risk search warrant, with shotguns ready, they wanted me along because they knew I wouldn't be shooting them in the back. Mm-hmm. I was well respected and well trusted, but then when I start to ask questions about the income tax, all of a sudden I'm a bozo. All of a sudden I'm somebody that doesn't deserve any answer. So I didn't expect them to, hey, stop the world because Joe has a question. But again, they took the same oath. Well, every IRS employee takes the same oath. And they would claim at various points during my short career there that they did care about the rule of law and all these things. But again, as soon as I brought up